Peace to you, my friends. I have a question for you. How many angels can dance on the head of this pin? Have you ever thought about that? Well, my senior Charlie Myers thought about that quite a lot and actually asked his students at the start of every class, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? It was an absurd question. It wasn't really meant to elicit an actual answer. There are all kinds of complications in trying to answer it. As angels do not have bodies, they're pure spirits, and they are not restricted to the laws of space and time as you and I are. So it was really meant to be more of a way to just kind of get us to think. And we definitely had many, many amazing and silly discussions on that matter. Monsignor Meyer was really an eccentric figure. I remember my first impressions of him, seeing him on campus riding his electric bike that he had constructed himself. And this was back in 1991, when electric bikes were not a common thing. He was an inventor and loved to create all kinds of contraptions and devices, like the automatic door opener that he had. So students would ring the doorbell to his room, and then he would press the button and the door would open. Or like how he had a huge satellite dish planted on the front of one of the seminary buildings, because before cable was a real thing, he already was into telecommunications and so forth. A brilliant mind as well, too, in terms of the way he thought, and especially in studying the relationship between religion and science, to show very clearly that they are not at odds with each other, and that both disciplines have something to say, and that both disciplines can learn from each other. It's interesting to note that Charlie Meyer lived to be 100 years old. He was born in 1920 here at St. Andrew Parish. This was his parish. He was baptized here. He went to school here. And then Cardinal Mundelein came for a mass here at St. Andrew. And Charlie Meyer was one of his altar servers. And the story goes that Cardinal Mundelein said to him, "You're going to my seminary. You're going to be a priest." And Charlie Meyer basically said, "Okay." And he ended up going to the seminary and becoming a priest in 1945. 2 years after that, he started teaching at the St. Mary of the Lake on their faculty, becoming the longest serving member of that faculty. He taught from 1947 to 2014. And in 2020, just this year, Monsignor Meyer celebrated his 75th anniversary as a priest, at the time being the most senior member in the Presbyterate of the Archdiocese of Chicago. And just this past Friday, on October 16th, at the age of 100 years, Monsignor Meyer returned to the Lord. Monsignor Meyer passed away, coincidentally or perhaps divinely ordained, on the very same day of our parish's 126th anniversary as a parish. In today's gospel, we have that familiar story of how people are trying to trip Jesus up and presenting him a ridiculous question. Presenting him with the question of, is it lawful or not to pay the temple tax? And Jesus, aware of the fact that they're trying to trip him up, does not fall into their illogical way of reasoning. And instead he asks them to show him a coin, and then he asks them, whose image is on that coin? And they say, Caesar's. And then Jesus says that very famous line, well then pay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God, thus ending the argument. It's very easy for us to understand what Jesus meant by pay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. A lot harder, though, for us to perhaps discern what it means when he says, give to God what belongs to God. And I think there are a couple things that we can focus on to help us understand what Jesus was getting at. The first is the comparison between two different identities. The identity of Caesar, which of course is this image that's on the coin, and the image, of course, of the unseen God. Caesars, of course, in the time of the Romans, were considered as gods. And so you have two very conflicting images. And of course, as is the case even today with politicians who promise to do everything and who say they've done everything and given us everything, so too was the case back then in the political propaganda of that time. And so we have Jesus presenting to us really two images of a ruler who promises everything but perhaps has given very little, and a God who promises everything and gives everything, even to the point of giving of his very self, giving of his very life on the cross for our salvation. The second thing I think that we can take away from is that response, that second part of that response, give to God what belongs to God. Having realized that our God is one who has given everything to us, then we in turn find a need to respond in a like manner, which means that we too give everything that belongs to God, which is our entire lives, our entire selves, everything that we do, everything that we are part of. We offer that in thankful response to our God. I think that's what Jesus meant. And I think that's what Charlie Meyer tried to live in his life. The fact that he spent almost the entirety of his priesthood teaching multiple generations of priests to fall in love with theology and to fall in love with the Lord. He was dedicated, and he gave his entire life to that mission. Obviously, in doing so, following the command that Jesus gave, give to God what belongs to God. It's good for us, my friends, to consider our own lives and how they too can be a gift in response to the generosity that God has shown in our lives. Perhaps we might not think about it, but every time that we go to work, we are giving our very lives back to God. Every time that we find ourselves doing chores at home or feeding the kids or driving the kids from here to there in our car, it may seem mundane and insignificant to us. But in the eyes of faith, they are indeed part of that gift of our entire lives that we give over to God, thus sanctifying those mundane things that fill up our daily lives. My friends, today's saying of Jesus, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give back to God what belongs to God, is really not an impossible task. If we look at life in that way, that God has given us everything, more than any human being or any political leader can ever promise to achieve. And in response, we give to God everything about us, about our lives, just like Charlie Meyer did. And we give thanks to God for Monsignor Meyer and for the gift that he gave to our church here in Chicago, and for the fact that he is a part of our parish's 126-year history. May he rest in peace, and may he now, perhaps, be able to answer the age-old question, how many angels actually can dance on a head of a pin?